Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
The Trump rule, as he puts it on Truth Social. The financial news today was great, he says, referring to the GDP report you've been hearing us talk about. Up 4.2%, he writes, as opposed to the predicted 2.5. It was actually 4.3 on an annualized rate. But in the modern market, the president writes, when you have good news, the market stays even or goes down because Wall Street's heads are wired differently than they used to be. If you're an investor or a market watcher, you'll get a kick out of this. The president says in the old days, when there was good news, market went up. Nowadays, when there's good news, market goes down because everybody thinks that interest rates will be immediately lifted to take care of potential inflation. He goes on to write that he wants a market the likes of which we haven't had in many decades, one that goes up on good news, down on bad news, the way it should be, he says. Though, of course, at any point in modern history, when interest rates were in question, yes, good news on Main Street has always been bad news on Wall Street and vice versa. If it's the interest rate game you're playing, and we are right now with a lot of questions about the Fed meeting, not to mention the Fed chair in the new year. This is where we start our conversation with Laura Davison, our Deputy Washington Bureau Chief, who's on the other end of the Truth Social feed, not to mention the latest dump of Epstein files. We're going to try to cover it all, Laura. It's great to see you. This is a stock market that the president loves to trump. It's near all-time highs. Why worry about it on a day like today when you've got great economic news?
Well, you can see in this Truth Post that Trump is really, really worried about interest rates in particular. This is, he's, supposed to be meeting with Rick Rieder, a potential Fed chair this week. And as he's kind of started to figure out is that he is not able to compel markets to do exactly what he wants them to do. We've seen this time and time again with the Liberation Day tariffs throughout the year, is that, he is trying to, tell traders, hey, look, it's good news, go up. And, we should keep interest rates steady. Right. However, that's not both how the Fed is thinking as well as how traders are thinking as they're looking at the whole holistic economy, which has a bunch of other warning signs out there. Pretty tough if you're
Kevin Hassett right now or whomever thinks they might be getting the next job as Fed chair, because the president's saying when the data blows the cover off the ball, when we're too hot, I still need you to cut. And I guess the market would go up in that world, but that would be unsustainable, wouldn't it?
It's very likely. This is a lot of very complicated mental gymnastics here that the president is asking both us as well as traders to do as he's trying to kind of create this economic message. This just really goes to show how much the president has really struggled when it comes to economic messaging. His team wants him out there talking about affordability, talking about these pocketbook issues that resonate with voters. Trump, however, is still very motivated by some of those metrics that, your average person isn't watching. He's motivated by the stock market. He's motivated by some of those key indicators, whereas people are still like, hey, my rent feels expensive. I can't buy a house. My grocery bill is 25% up from what it was a couple of years ago.
Well, combine this with the latest dump of the Epstein files, probably not a great news day, at least if that's the way the president is interpreting the economic news, because the markets are holding positive right now. But we've got another big dump, thousands more Epstein files, and the president's name is appearing more times in this tranche than the first. He was asked about this at Mar-a-Lago last evening. Here's what Donald Trump said.
Everybody was friendly with this guy, either friendly or not friendly, but he was around. He was all over Palm Beach and other places. The head of Harvard was his best friend, Larry Summers. And Bill Clinton was a friend of his, but everybody was.
So, downplaying his relationship with Epstein, only to learn this morning, according to an email from an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, Donald Trump was listed as a passenger on at least 8 flights on Epstein's private jet between 1993 and 96, including at least 4 flights on which Ghislaine Maxwell was also present. Email says Trump also took at least 1 flight with Epstein and a 20-year-old. Is this the most significant finding in this second day?
This very much could be. And this has been one of the points that Trump has repeatedly denied. He said he was never on the plane. He never went to the island. And now it's showing that he was, in fact, on the plane, according to these documents. Trump, in his remarks last night, he mentioned that he thought it was a shame that people's reputations were being tarnished because of their connections with Jeffrey Epstein, and also mentioned he thought it was a distraction from all the work that the White House is doing. So this is clearly someone who's in damage control mode. We also saw the Justice Department Department come out with a very interesting and I would say unusual tweet saying that, in these documents, yes, Trump is named, but it is false and salacious, and these essentially sort of undercutting their own documents and their own release. So this is, clearly, some of the critics coming out saying that this process has gotten very political, that the White House and the Justice Department are trying to protect Trump. This feeds a lot of that suspicion.
Yeah, Laura, thank you so much. I know it's a super busy day in the newsroom, and it's always great to have you. Laura Davison with us.
Stay with us on Balance of Power. We'll have much more coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
That statement that Laura refers to coming from DOJ reads, some of these documents, I'm reading directly here, some of these documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims made against President Trump that were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election. To be clear, the claims are unfounded and false. And if they had a shred of credibility, they certainly would have been weaponized against President Trump already. This is where we start our conversation with Becca Balint, the Democratic Congresswoman from Vermont's at-large district, is back with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. Congresswoman, it's great to see you. I wasn't expecting to have a full conversation with you about the Epstein files, but I'll start with what appears to be news today. And the administration speaking by way of the DOJ to suggest that the actual files being released are sensationalist and untrue. What do they mean by that?
What they mean by that is they don't like what's in the file, so they're trying to distract from it. I mean, let's just look at one instance alone. When you look at the 8 flights that so far we've been able to document that the president was on, he has tried to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein for years now. It was clear that they had a much closer relationship than he will admit to. And what is so frustrating to so many of us right now is that Americans can handle the truth. We want to see the documents so that we can make a decision for ourselves. And, I want to highlight for you one of the ways in which people connected to this horrible case of Jeffrey Epstein have themselves had their names dragged through the mud. I'm thinking about people like Maria Farmer, who had said, because she had once worked for Jeffrey Epstein, she had said all the way back in 1996 to the FBI, this man has a problem with child pornography. 1996. It took the release of these documents for her to finally be vindicated that, in fact, she did go to the FBI and it was buried. And so we deserve to get the information unvarnished, unfiltered from this release of documents. And of course, the president and his team are going to try to spin it. But just the fact that there were 8 flights that he was on that he did not admit to, there is other material here. And Americans can handle the truth. We want to see the truth.
Americans can handle the truth. Congresswoman, you have an important post on the Judiciary Committee. There has been talk by the likes of Ro Khanna and Tom Massey about holding, and that would be, of course, these are the 2 names on the discharge petition, holding the Attorney General in inherent contempt. Is that something that you plan to pursue on your committee?
So certainly, I don't want to get ahead of my ranking member, Jamie Raskin, but certainly both members on the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee have strong concerns that we are not getting honest answers from this administration. And I think it is time to have the Attorney General come before us to answer the questions, because she was the one, in fact, that had gone on TV with so-called, binders of names documents related to the case. And then it turned out that as soon as, we called the bluff and said, OK, let's come forward with the information, all of a sudden she clams up and is not willing to be straight with us. And again, the Americans can handle the truth. What they can't handle is being treated like they're idiots. And I feel like what we've been getting from this administration as it relates to the Jeffrey Epstein case is treating Americans like they are children and they can't decide for themselves by looking at the documents. And of course, we want to redact any names of victims. But the victims who many of us met with back in November, they said, look, we want the information out. Don't tell us that you're protecting us when we're the ones that want the information out. And so it's long past time for this administration to come clean on the president's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
There's a lot of other stuff I want to ask you about, but I'm going to pose a question here that we hear asked frequently by Republicans who are critical of Democrats' posture towards this whole story. This question just arrived from a terminal user. Please ask the representative why they, and I'm assuming he means Democrats, why they didn't care about the Epstein files during Biden's presidency. How would you answer him?
Well, so I want to just be clear with the person who's writing in about that. This is a case for myself and many of us who have been victims of abuse ourselves. And there are people in Congress like myself who have been victims of abuse ourselves. I don't care where the truth takes us. I never have. If it implicates any past presidents of either party or anyone in a position that should have released more information, I want to see it. I want to see the light of day. And there were pending cases that were going on under the Biden administration that restricted the amount of information that could be released. But I want it all out. I'm one of those people that says what this whole disgusting case needs is a lot of disinfectant. A lot of very powerful men and some powerful women have been protected, and it's long past time for that to end.
Well, they're going to keep coming out here. Congresswoman, what are you going to be looking for? The next dump and the dump after that?
What I'm going to be looking for is who are those people who are responsible back in 96, back in 2008, that continue to make decisions to give this man, Jeffrey Epstein, and his associates a pat on the wrist. At what point did we know who else was implicated? This was not just one man. There were other people that had to have been involved in abusing all of these young girls and women and covering up about it. And so I want to go where the information takes us. And I fully anticipate it will be powerful men and women across the political spectrum. And I don't give a damn about that. I want these women to finally get some modicum of justice.
Wow. Congresswoman, we got big economic news today, and we were talking about it right before you joined us with Laura Davison. Big spending from consumers. Third quarter GDP came in much stronger than expected, hotter than expected, depending on who you ask here, to the point where there are questions and the president's truthing now about the potential interruption in interest rate cuts because of this. Did Democrats and mainstream economists get the impact of tariffs wrong? What are Vermonters feeling?
Oh, my gosh. No, I don't think they got it wrong, because we're talking about the markets versus what people are feeling at home. What people are feeling at home is they can't afford a house. They can't find an apartment. They have real concerns about the amount of debt and student loans that they're carrying. And so oftentimes this top line information about the markets really does not trickle down to regular people, many of whom don't have these investments. People who are living paycheck to paycheck, many of them here in Vermont. And so oftentimes it's a mixed economic picture. But I can tell you, I've been back in Vermont now talking to, rank and file voters, people who are feeling like things are not in a good place right now. And certainly if you run any kind of small business that relies on imports of whether it's goods or parts that you need for your products, this has not been a good year for you because you have to either pay for it out of your own pocket or pass it off to consumers. There are numerous businesses that I've talked to in Vermont that may not survive this tariff regime. So it's always a mixed bag of economic information. What I'm most concerned about is what rank and file people are telling me across Vermont. And what they're still telling me is they are struggling, absolutely still struggling.
What are you hearing when you talk to folks who run the resorts like Smuggler's Notch, like Stowe, when you go to the Trapp Family Lodge? Congresswoman, are there Canadians around this season?
A lot fewer Canadians around this season. They are voting with their feet. And it is unfortunate. I'll just say to listeners, it was an unfortunate visit that Secretary Noem made to our border communities months ago, in which she was mocking Canada as the 51st state. And they haven't forgotten that. It was an incredible slight to them. We are one of their biggest trading partners in Vermont. So they're voting with their feet. They're not coming to the resorts. Some people who have come here for decades for the holidays have decided not to come. And it really hurts those, again, a lot of those, certainly the resorts, but the mom and pop restaurants and stores that benefit from that traffic.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, and I hope that it's at least a beautiful winter season up there and that the resorts find a way around it. Congresswoman, it's good to have you back on Bloomberg TV and radio. That's Becca Balint, the Democrat from Vermont's at-large district.
Stay with us on Balance of Power. We'll have much more coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Thousands more pages to go through in newsrooms across Washington and New York today. Another drop of Epstein files from the Department of Justice. They came down in the middle of the night. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. And so we've had a couple of hours to dig through all of these. And federal prosecutors, as we are learning in this latest batch, had prepared an indictment of Jeffrey Epstein in 2007 that would have charged him with sex trafficking. Grand jurors heard months of testimony on the case. This now just emerging. 3 of his employees, 2 of his companies would have been charged in a draft indictment that accused him of abusing girls as young as 14. This is tough stuff. There's nothing good that I have to say about this story right now if you're already concerned about the Epstein story. But we're also learning more about Donald Trump. Remember, on Friday, when that dump took place around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, one of the first names to emerge was Bill Clinton, and there were a bunch of photos of him as well, including one in a hot tub, another in a swimming pool, another on a plane with a young lady whose face is obscured. The redactions were almost as big a story as the emergence of Bill Clinton. It's a different look today. Donald Trump's name appears throughout these thousands of pages many more times, as we also are learning for the first time that he was somewhat of a regular on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet. The president has said he was not on the jet or on the plane, or on the island, rather. And in this case, we do have flight records showing that the president, before, of course, he was the president, Donald Trump traveled on Epstein's jet many more times than has been previously reported, with at least 8 flights between 1993 and 96, including at least 4 in which Ghislaine Maxwell was present, and a flight with Epstein and a 20-year-old whose name is redacted. 2 flights as well with, quote, women who would be possible witnesses in a Maxwell case, unquote. So we're getting a little bit more color here. And by the way, there are thousands more files to be released, and it looks like this is going to go right into the new year. We turn to our political panel for their thoughts on an issue that has been fraught with political risk for Donald Trump. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino are with us. Rick is Republican strategist partner at Stonecourt Capital. Jeanne is democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. It's great to have you both with us. Jeanne, how big of a revelation is this? Because Donald Trump isn't talking today. He doesn't have any public events. People are out shopping. Maybe this doesn't resonate with a lot of people, but the fact that he was on this plane at least 8 times means what to you?
Yeah, and that email you read from a prosecutor from the Southern District of New York, and what we still don't know, or at least I don't know, maybe reporters who are combing through these have found, is what was the response to his or her email with this revelation of these 8 flights, and that'll be fascinating. Another portion that we're learning now is this very grotesque letter, handwritten apparently from Epstein to Nasser, Larry Nasser, the convicted sex offender whose victims were, over 150 young gymnasts. There's a handwritten letter sent apparently from Epstein to Nasser with some really grotesque comments in it, including about the president. This is all in this drop of 30,000 today. And I think this drip is going, to your point, continue, I think, maybe into the new year. And that is most unfortunate for the president and for the White House politically, because the president wants to be talking today about very good economic news. It is all being drowned out by these very, very difficult stories in which his name is mentioned.
Yeah, the letter to Nasser, a convicted sex offender, is quite remarkable here. Jeanne, from the Damage Control Department, Rick, what does the White House do with this if the president said he was never on the jet?
It's a really good question. It's almost like they're trapped in their own spin at this point. You can now see why Donald Trump reversed course after years of saying, get the files out, to the point where now, he's been the primary obstruction in the last year of his administration to shield the public from these files. So now we know why it's been so painful to watch this administration try to bootstrap their way into what to do about these files. And this is no better. The idea that they haven't delivered all the required, there's a law that requires them to deliver all that data on Friday. They didn't do it. They continue to eke it out. It's only hurting their case. It's only upsetting more Republicans. Democrats were already on the hunt, but now Republicans are saying, wait a minute, this is a law. You have to adhere to it. There's talk about all kinds of contempt provisions for DOJ and things like that. So it's actually getting worse, I think, not better. Everything they've done to try and improve the situation has only exacerbated it. There's no such thing as a come clean policy at this White House. They're trying to spin it as best they can. But as Jeanne says, in the meantime, when good things happen, they're not going to get any attention. And when bad things happen, it's just going to seem like piling on. So it's going to be a rough holiday season for the White House, because best that we can tell, they'll just keep eking this stuff out, taking down pictures, putting them back up after they're caught. It really is seemingly on the borderline of incompetence.
Wow. Jeanne, we just talked to Congresswoman Balint of Vermont, a Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, who says the ranking member, Jamie Raskin, is working up potentially contempt charges here for the Attorney General. We know that Tom Massey and Ro Khanna have already said that they plan to pursue inherent contempt. Do you actually expect a congressional answer to this? It would require Republicans to play along.
It would. And, I think as we looked at that discharge petition and so many people thought it was probably going to go nowhere, and then it ended up getting wildly huge bipartisan support in the end. This could go somewhere. And, I just think about it, Joe, like, have you ever gotten an email where somebody emails you and then tries to retract it? Now, you may not have looked at that email originally, but once they retract it, you're like, oh, what was in there that they didn't want me to see? This is what the White House and the Department of Justice are doing and have been doing. Susie Wiles was absolutely right when she said Bondi whiffed this. Imagine if they had just said, we are going to do what the president promised on the campaign trail, release everything. If they had gotten ahead of this story, it wouldn't necessarily be good for the president for sure, but it would be a lot less painful for the president, but more importantly, the victims of all of this. And I would just also add, this goes well beyond President Trump and President Clinton. It goes to our institutions. The FBI getting complaints about pedophilia in Jeffrey Epstein 30 years ago and not doing anything to address that. Garcia is right, Robert Garcia, the congressman, to get that investigated. We have an institutional and a government-wide problem. And so, at this point, the White House is going to have, to Rick's point, a very bad Christmas of this because they're not handling it well. This is crisis management number one, and they're failing at that.
I'm sure I've never tried to retract an email or a text, Jeannie. But, I was thinking earlier, 8 times, gosh, and maybe that's not a lot if you fly on friends' private jets. But how many times have you ridden in someone's car 8 times? Would you remember that person? Because he's going to be asked if he remembered this, having claimed to have not been on the plane. By the way, President's not truth socialing about this story today. He is truthing about a stronger than expected economic report, Rick, that he doesn't seem to be very happy about. He says financial news today was great, referring to the GDP. It was up 4.3%. He says 4.2, but whatever. But in the modern market, when you have good news, the market stays even or even goes down, he says, because Wall Street's heads are wired differently than they used to be. In the old days, when there was good news, the market went up. Now, where there's good news, the market goes down because everybody thinks that interest rates will be immediately lifted to take care of inflation. Looking back at the market, we're right near our highs of the day here, Rick, and we're set to close near our highs for the year. Good news on Main Street has long been bad news on Wall Street. What's he talking about?
Never predict the market halfway through the day. I think that's really good advice that someone needs to give to Donald Trump. And look, only 3 or 4 months ago, Joe, we were talking about, has Donald Trump lost his interest in the markets? He doesn't seem to care. Right. He's just putting out economic news during the day that affects the markets, doesn't seem to care. Markets go up or down. He hasn't made any comments about them lately. And then now he seems obsessed with it all over again. I mean, why pull away from the positive news you have about growth in the country? Talk about manufacturing, talk about new jobs. Instead, he laments the fact that the market's not, performing the way it should be. Honestly, I mean, he's like bracketing himself. I'll give you the bad news first, then I'm going to tell you the good news, and I'm going to go back to the bad news. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, he's usually much better at promotional skills, but today he seems a little off his game, and maybe it's because of the conversation we're having around Epstein.
It's a honker. This is a long post, Jeannie. I don't know if anyone's counted the words here yet, but he goes on to write, a nation can never be economically great if eggheads are allowed to do everything within their power to destroy the upward slope. Who's he talking about, us?
I think so. I'm personally offended by that, Joe. And you know what made me laugh? And I couldn't read the whole thing, but the top in caps where he says the Trump rule. And then he ends it by saying anybody who disagrees with me about the Trump rule will never be fed care. It's to Rick's point, it makes very little sense. He's got a story to tell, just like the other night when he had 18 minutes. Instead of telling a story that makes sense to people, instead of empathizing and saying, hang in there, things are going to get better, he's screaming at people. Here, he can't get out of his own way to say, we've got good economic news today. Let's celebrate that. So I think, the president is frustrated. It is showing through. But he's not the first president to feel this way. They simply do not like how these things are reflected in the market when they aren't the best interest for them.
Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis, our great panel, Bloomberg Politics contributors. Thank you both.
Stay with us on Balance of Power. We'll have much more coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Big news coming from the White House yesterday. The administration suspending leases for all 5 wind farms that are currently under construction off the East Coast. One of them in particular we're going to be focusing on here, Revolution Wind, which is just off the coast of Rhode Island, just south of Point Judith, if you know where that is, and is currently being assembled in New London. Now, this should not be a big shock. If you've followed what President Trump has said over the course of the campaign, his first term and now back in the White House, In this case, the Interior Department, in fact, halted these projects in the name of national security, suggesting that the turbines may interfere with radar. The president, of course, has never been a fan of wind energy, as we're reminded through the ages. Listen.
I never understood wind. I know windmills very much. I've studied it better than anybody.
You'll see these things all over the place. They destroy everything. They're horrible and the most expensive energy there is. They ruin the environment. They kill the birds. They kill the whales. So we're going to try and have a policy where no windmills are being built. We don't allow windmills. We're not allowing any windmills to go up. I mean, unless there's a legal situation where somebody committed to it a long time ago, we don't allow windmills. You're not supposed to lose money with energy. And everybody that's doing wind is in virtual bankruptcy right now.
And so here we are with 5 projects representing $28 billion in committed capital, several billion of those in the state of Connecticut, which is why we're glad to be joined by the governor of Connecticut, Democrat Ned Lamont. It's great to have you, sir, with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. If, in fact, this is halted here, the mayor of New London, Michael Passero, says the Grinch has just stolen Christmas. Is he right?
Not a heck of a Christmas present, was it? Look, you just heard the president say he doesn't like wind power, but he's not going to interrupt things that were permitted a long time ago. Our wind, Revolution Wind, was actually permitted under Trump 1 back in 2018-19, so a long time ago. So this was a real shock to our system. They did it to us over Labor Day as well. Remember, they had a stop work order. No warning at all. This time they've pulled the permits. And we've got to fight like heck to come back, because you're never going to bring down the price of electricity in New England unless we get more generation, and that's what wind power does.
Governor, in September, your state successfully won its bid in courts to lift the moratorium that the Trump administration put in when it first took office on wind power. Now the administration is going at it again and raising national security concerns. Some analysts are looking at that and saying this could be a more durable way to essentially do the same thing. What's your take, and do you think those national security concerns are legitimate?
No. I think the president said, I don't like wind power. Come up with another way that you can shut it down. And it was only very recently they came up with these national security concerns. I talked to the Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum. I've known him for many years. I said, I'm not sure this is for real, but if you want to, we'll come down, we'll talk to you about it. We'll bring down the folks building the wind power, the engineers, but don't stop us in mid-construction for the second time in 3 months. You're just blowing a hole in our efforts to bring down the price of electricity in New England.
You know, we understand that this project is about 85% complete. It would power some 350,000 homes across Connecticut and Rhode Island. What will happen to electricity bills without the wind farm?
More likely to spike. We can't put pipes in the ground to get natural gas and oil. We're just not that type of a state. We don't have that capacity. It's very rare that we can create our own generation. Offshore wind is one way we can do that. And the more generation we have, the less spiking energy during very cold periods. And that means we can save money for electric ratepayers.
We want to welcome our viewers joining us from the TV side, Bloomberg TV colleagues. And we are here with Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont talking, of course, about this new announcement out of the Department of Energy today, putting a halt on those 5 major wind farm projects, including the one that's being assembled in your state. Governor, I'm curious how this is going to play with constituents not only in your state, but across the country, as energy prices are expensive, it's cold, and they're looking to spike. You know, the energy crisis is something that's constantly talked about. This is also an administration that is trying to remove barriers to other forms of energy, including nuclear. The president has said he wants to restart coal. So why not add wind energy to that? Why is this specific mechanism of generating power in his crosshairs?
It is contradictory. I've talked to the president about this. He cares very strongly about bringing down the price of electricity, especially in New England, where we don't have a lot of our own generation and it gets expensive. I said, we'll work with you on a nuclear power, we'll work with you on natural gas and other sources, but don't pull the plug on a plant that's already 85% complete, ready to turn on in just a few months. That makes no sense at all. I thought we had agreement they weren't going to do that. Then we were shocked.
All right. Well, I want to get back to the justification from the administration here, Governor. And I know you commented on this briefly, but I'd like to hear more about the national security concerns or lack thereof, knowing that the Interior Department says these turbines may interfere with radar systems. We understand, however, according to the Attorney General William Tong, the project's already gone through federal review. He says fully vetted, permitted, state, federal, up and down, inside out, every which way you can. Is that correct?
William's absolutely correct. And actually, it went through a very strong national security review over the last few years, voted on a bipartisan basis in Congress just a year and a half ago, where they said
so is the administration just making this up?
Issues.
Is the administration just making this up then?
I think so, but look, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Get us down there. We'll bring the very best engineers from Ørsted, who's the developer. We'll talk it through. But there's no excuse for shutting this down in mid-stride, not in the ninth inning of the ball game. Look, they're seeing drones has changed the world dramatically. They want to take a second look at, onshore radar. It didn't change the world in the last, 12 months.
Also, this is not, to a point you made earlier, this is not a new technology. These wind turbines have existed in Europe, much to the president's chagrin, for quite a few years now. We haven't previously heard of it having big impacts on NATO or Europe's military readiness in offshore areas there. We've also got some reporting from Bloomberg and analysts at Raymond James saying, I'm skeptical that there's any new information about the military concerns all of a sudden that single-handedly warrants these projects being halted. So do you think this is an aesthetic, not necessarily an economic or national security decision?
I mean, last time around it was birds and whales. This time around it's radar. I don't know what it's going to be next time. I got to tell you, I come out of the business world. I thought the Trump administration had a lot of business folks and it was going to be a pro-business administration. But this herky-jerky, on again, off again. First they did it in tariffs, then they did it in SNAP. Now they're doing wind power. Makes it very difficult to do business with this administration. Very difficult.
Well, I'd like to hear more about that just from your view in Connecticut. You mentioned SNAP. We can add Obamacare subsidies that are about to expire, sending people's bills higher. How much are you and other governors working to fill affordability gaps that are being created by the administration?
I can tell you here in Connecticut, we've set aside, $500 million just to at least protect the most vulnerable. But the idea that you were going to yank food support from working families when food prices have almost doubled in the last 5 years made no sense. And then as Jonas pointed out, when it comes to the health care subsidies on the exchange, people are going to see their bills go up $1,000 or $2,000. That's a heck of a Christmas present, and that's a real shock to the system. So we made sure that we protected all of our families up to about $128,000. Then we softened the blow for everybody else.
Governor, you said you've been talking to the Trump administration throughout this process and about this decision, how they were treating it previously. I'm wondering, did you get any kind of a heads up? Have you spoken to the president since this decision came down? And if not, what do you want to tell him?
No, this really came out of left field at the very last moment. We had a conference call, all the governors with Secretaries Burgum and Wright just a couple of weeks ago, talking about pipelines and natural gas. This did not come up at all. Like I said, I think this was a problem, a solution looking for a problem, and it's the wrong solution.
Just lastly then, Governor, what would you tell people driving to work today in Putnam, Connecticut, who are already looking at expensive electric bills? They're worried about the data center that might be coming in next door. Do they need to brace for higher prices? And what will they look like in 2026?
Well, we're saying a pause on data centers just because they suck so much electricity and drive up costs. But one of the things we need is more generation. I think those ratepayers in Putnam know all too well that we're doing everything we can to add more electricity generation, to bring down costs for you and your family. And pulling the plug on Revolution Wind in the ninth inning makes no sense at all.
Well, this is something that we're going to keep talking about here. It sounds like you might not have a sense or be able to quantify how much those bills are going to rise, Governor. Is that fair to say?
I can tell you that it's going to go up, and it could go up dramatically during very cold times when wind power is generating the most, and we're going to have a spike in energy demand. That's what I'm trying to protect you from.
I hear you. And right when heating oil season kicks in New England. Governor, it's great to have you. We appreciate your insights today on Bloomberg. Joining us live from Connecticut, that's Democratic Governor Ned Lamont with us.
Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.